Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are focusing on a figure who, for over 3 decades, provided this rock-solid, often silent, foundational stability for perhaps the most flamboyant and tumultuous rock band in history.
He was, anything but quiet behind the scenes.
Exactly.
We're going far beyond that standard narrative of the quiet stone and exploring William George Wyman, born William George Perks in 1936. Our sources paint this picture of restless, really analytical mind. I mean, a man whose 31 years as the bassist for the Rolling Stones were paralleled by careers as an inventor, a meticulous chronicler of history.
A published author, an acclaimed photographer, the list goes on.
It really does.
And that dual life is the mission of this deep dive. For you, the learner, we're distilling the essential nature of Wyman. What made his specific sound so integral to the Stones' identity.
And how did he manage to just walk away in 1993, already having established these multiple successful non-musical careers?
Yeah, it's the story of the anchor, who was also the historian. And yes, we will definitely be unpacking those famously complex personal dynamics.
The material we've gathered is drawn from some really comprehensive biographies and historical records, which gives us this unique opportunity to trace the trajectory from his very austere post-war childhood. Right through to his surprising return to the studio with the Rolling Stones in 2023. It's a study in consistency and curiosity.
To really understand Bill Wyman, you have to start with William George Perks, and the setting is just so crucial. He was born in Lewisham Hospital, raised in Penge, southeast London. And when we look at the other members of the Stones, who were so often defined by their theatricality or their bohemian art school roots, Wyman's background, it really stands out because it was defined by scarcity.
Absolutely. The sources use very evocative language. They note his early life was scarred by poverty. His father was a bricklayer, and he was one of 6 children.
So this wasn't just like a working class struggle.
No. This was a childhood defined by survival during World War II. He lived through the London Blitz.
And the details from that period are, they're harrowing. We aren't talking about distant memories. We're talking about tangible, terrifying events. The record shows specific instances of enemy fighter planes strafing in his neighborhood.
Wow.
Killing neighbors. Experiencing that kind of violence and instability so early on, I think it fundamentally contributes to that intensely grounded, even cautious nature he later exhibited in the band, right?
I think you have to believe that. And that need for stability is visible immediately in his educational path. He attended Beckenham and Penge County Grammar School, which was a respectable education.
But he didn't even sit for his exams.
No, he didn't sit for his General Certificate of Education exams. He left school prematurely at Easter 1953.
And that wasn't some rebellious choice, was it? It was pure economic necessity.
Exactly. His father insisted he take a steady job, which led him to working for a bookmaker. The promise of immediate reliable income it trumped the long-term rewards of academic study.
And this is the mentality that he then carried into the most unstable business imaginable.
Rock and roll.
Rock and roll.
That stability was interrupted, ironically, by mandatory national service. In 1955, Wyman was called up for 2 years in the Royal Air Force.
He actually signed up for an extra year, too.
He did, which saw him posted to Oldenburg Air Base in North Germany, working in the motor transport section.
And Germany becomes this, accidental portal to his musical career. Being stationed there exposed him directly to sounds that hadn't yet fully permeated post-war Britain. He was hearing rock and roll not only in local dance halls, like one called Zum Grunenwald,
which is a great name,
but critically via the American Forces Network, AFN radio.
And that exposure was just transformative. In 1956, while he was still in Germany, he bought his first guitar for 400 Deutschmark.
Now, we know he had some piano lessons as a boy, right? Between ages 10 and 13.
He did, but the skiffle group he formed on camp in 1957 with Casey Jones, that was his first real engagement with modern popular music.
But the guitar, it wasn't his destiny. When he married his first wife, Diane Corey, in 1959, he made a serious financial investment a year later.
A Burns electric guitar for 52 pounds.
Which, when you adjust for inflation, is well over 1,500 pounds today. A huge amount of money.
A fortune. Yet he still felt dissatisfied with his progress on the instrument.
And this leads us to the critical turning point for the Rolling Stones sound.
He switched to bass guitar, the motivation. Hearing the bass played live at a Barron Knights concert, It resonated with him instantly.
What's fascinating is that he didn't just switch instruments. He, engineered his own specific sound because he couldn't afford the standard equipment.
That's where the inventiveness comes in. He purchased a second-hand, UK-built Dallas tuxedo bass, and in an act of pure musical engineering, he manually removed the frets.
He made his own fretless bass.
He created his own fretless instrument. It was a 30-inch short-scale bass, which became the cornerstone of his early tone. This instrument choice, born of necessity and curiosity, made history.
That DIY bass became his ticket. By 1961, he was playing it in a local band called the Cliftons.
And his unusual instrument, that deep, slightly thudding, fretless sound, was instrumental when he auditioned for the nascent Rolling Stones.
So, December 7th, 1962, the audition at the White Horse Pub in Chelsea. He's there to succeed Dick Taylor.
Right. And the band members, Jagger, Richards, and Jones, they were initially a bit reserved about him, but they were deeply impressed by his equipment.
His gear.
His gear. He brought the custom fretless bass, plus a modified amplifier, and a Vox AC30. In a time when the Stones were struggling and scrappy, Wyman arrived with the sound, the gear, and the older, more grounded demeanor they desperately needed.
And that grounded demeanor was literally reinforced by his age. Wyman was the oldest member of the group, which must have contributed to his anchoring role.
Oh, for sure.
And just a quick final note on his name. He legally changed his surname to Wyman in August 1964.
Right, taking the phonetic spelling of a friend from his RAF days, Lee Wyman. So that military connection remained even in his stage name.
So when you look at this origin story, Wyman was kind of the accidental genius, wasn't he?
I think that's the perfect way to put it. He didn't come from a deep blues background like Richards or the art school environment of Jagger. He brought real-world stability, financial capability, owning his own amps was huge, and most importantly, a technical innovation.
That fretless bass.
That fretless bass.
Yeah.
It instantly differentiated their rhythm section. His stability became the essential anchor in a band that was designed for glorious chaos.
So moving into his core 3-decade tenure, Wyman's contribution is just staggering. He anchored the bass on the band's first 19 studio albums.
19.
A steady, if quiet, presence. He also contributed backing vocals frequently through 1967, showing he wasn't completely locked into just the low end.
His creative contribution often gets overshadowed by the Glimmer Twins, but the sources confirm he has 2 specific songwriting credits released by the Rolling Stones. The first is In Another Land.
From the psychedelic album, their Satanic Majesty's Request in '67.
Exactly.
And what's interesting about In Another Land is that Wyman sang lead on it, and it was actually released as his first official solo single.
Right, credited solely to him even while he was a full-time member of the Stones. It was an early sign of his independent musical identity trying to break through.
Yeah.
The second track is Downtown Susie, which later appeared on the Metamorphosis Outtakes collection.
Mick Jagger sang lead on this one.
He did, but the original title was Sweet Lyle Lucy, named after Lyle Street in London's notorious red light district.
And the title was changed by their manager, Alan Klein, right, without the band's input.
Allegedly, yes. And that small detail is a perfect illustration of the kind of managerial and corporate chaos that Wyman was constantly observing and, more importantly, recording.
That quiet observation leads us to the core of his non-musical role, the chronicler. Wyman kept a comprehensive diary throughout his entire life, starting from childhood. This wasn't just a memo book. It was a meticulous record of every gig, every recording session, every business meeting, every argument.
This journal is historically invaluable. It formed the foundation for his 1990 autobiography, Stone Alone, and his 2002 book, Rolling with the Stones.
But keeping such a detailed record during that period, it must have created a fascinating tension, didn't it? He was both an active participant and this impartial forensic observer.
It raises a crucial question about the internal dynamics. How did the band react to the idea that their bassist was constantly taking notes? Did they trust the keeper of the secrets?
Well, his closeness to Brian Jones in those early turbulent years suggests a certain bond built on shared observation.
That's a great point. The source notes that Wyman and Jones often shared rooms on tour, and Wyman was one of only 2 band members.
Alongside Charlie Watts.
Right. To attend Jones' funeral in 1969.
That bond with Jones, the outcast, is significant.
And that journal gives Wyman the authority to make controversial claims that challenge the established mythology of the band, which is usually controlled by Jagger and Richards.
For example, his assertion in Stone Alone that he co-composed the iconic riff for Jumpin' Jack Flash.
Exactly. He said he worked on that iconic riff with Brian Jones and Charlie Watts. This directly contradicts the established narrative that credits the song primarily to Jagger and Richards.
And while the claim remains disputed, the fact that it comes from a detailed contemporaneous record forces rock historians to pause and re-examine the creative process.
That detail alone underscores the immense value of the perpetual witness, the man with the diary.
But perhaps the most shocking example of his internal leverage involves the band's biggest anthem, I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
This is where it gets really compelling regarding the internal politics. Our source material confirms there was a surprising and deeply consequential conflict over releasing that song as a single in 1965.
You mean the song that defined the Rolling Stones globally was almost shelved?
It was. The sources are very clear. The song was released only after a nail-biting, razor-thin 3-2 internal band vote.
A vote?
A vote. Astonishingly, the two core songwriters, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, voted against releasing it.
No. Why?
They felt it wasn't commercial enough. Or perhaps that the riff felt too raw, too simple.
So the rhythm section, Wyman, Charlie Watts, and Brian Jones had to vote down the frontmen.
Yes, that totally shifts your perception of the Stones' early decision-making process. The quiet observers were the ones who saw the commercial and artistic potential of what became the most defining rock song of the 1960s.
It illustrates that the anchor wasn't just physical or rhythmic, it was often moral and strategic.
Yeah, Wyman's inherent stability and clear-headedness provided the counterbalance needed to overcome the volatile creative arguments between Jagger and Richards.
And all the while, he maintained a remarkably busy schedule of side projects outside the Stones' orbit throughout the 70s and 80s, which really demonstrates his versatility.
He was a highly sought-after session player, especially in the blues rock community. He played on foundational albums like the London Howlin' Wolf Sessions in 1971.
With Clapton and Charlie Watts.
Right. Then there was Jamming with Edward in 1972, that spontaneous supergroup jam that included Ry Cooder, Nicky Hopkins, Jagger, and Watts. He was clearly a central figure in that whole London session scene.
And he also achieved genuine mainstream solo success.
He did. His single, Si Si Je Suis un Rockstar, a French-English title translating to Yes, Yes, I Am a Rockstar, became a top 20 hit in several countries in July 1981.
That's an achievement that often gets lost in the enormity of the Stones' legacy.
It really does. And he also dove headfirst into film composition. He composed the soundtrack album for the 1981 movie Green Ice.
And then he worked on two films by the celebrated Italian horror director Dario Argento.
Phenomena in '85 and Opera in '87. That's a fascinating, unexpected detour into the avant-garde horror space.
We also have to mention the philanthropic work inspired by his friend Faces bassist Ronnie Lane, who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
Right. In 1983, Wyman helped organize Willie and the Poor Boys, a fundraiser concert tour for action research into multiple sclerosis.
That concert series and the resulting album involved a truly rotating cast of high-profile guests, a who's who of British rock royalty.
Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. It demonstrated his capability not just as a musician, but as an organizer and a leader.
So, after 31 years of anchor service, chronicling, and composing, Wyman officially stepped away. He left the Rolling Stones in January 1993, following the massive 1989-90 Steel Wheels Urban Jungle tours.
His tenure remains the benchmark. 31 years, 19 studio albums. It is an official, fixed period of the band's history.
And while Daryl Jones has capably filled the bassist role ever since, it's telling that the Stones have never made him an official member.
That's right. They acknowledge that Wyman's era is a unique historical chapter. One which, thanks to his journals, is perhaps the most comprehensively documented period of the band's history.
The lesson here really is that the quietest person in the room often sees the most. Wyman's discipline, born of his necessity-driven childhood, translated into the stability the Stones needed musically, strategically, and historically. Let's dedicate a moment to the specific technical contribution of Bill Wyman. He wasn't just playing the instrument, he was, in a way, inventing the sound that defined the early Stones. We talked about his modified Dallas tuxedo bass, but let's analyze the key elements of his signature tone.
This is critical for understanding why the early Stones sounded so different from bands like the Beatles or the Who. Wyman's signature sound hinged on two core elements: the instrument's physical design and his technique.
Okay, so start with the instrument. The Dallas tuxedo was a 30-inch short-scale bass. Why does that matter musically? Especially when compared to the standard instruments of the time, like a Fender Precision bass, which were typically, 34 inches?
Right. The short scale means the distance between the frets is smaller, which makes the strings looser and easier to bend. It gives the instrument a rounder, fatter, and slightly less articulate tone.
So a deeper, warmer tone.
Exactly. It was very different from the punchy, defined tone of a standard P-Bass. But the crucial innovation, as we said, was removing the frets entirely.
What's the sonic consequence of having a fretless bass in a 1960s rock and roll band?
By removing the metal frets, he eliminated the sharp attack you get when a string hits metal. Instead, you get a smoother, more fluid, almost woody sustain.
Ah.
It mimics the deep resonance of an acoustic upright double bass, which was the instrument of choice in traditional American blues and jazz.
So he was intentionally importing that traditional blues foundation into the electric rock format.
Exactly. And this pairs perfectly with his technique, which was a walking bass style.
Which is a melodic, often syncopated bass line, where the bassist plays a note on every beat.
Right, often using passing tones to smoothly transition from one chord change to the next.
So he wasn't playing aggressive, high-energy rock lines. He was providing this constant melodic movement underneath the song's structure.
It creates rhythmic stability. Think of Willie Dixon, the legendary blues bassist and songwriter, or Ricky Fenton, who was prominent in the British R&B scene. Wyman was directly inspired by them.
I see.
His walking bass style, delivered with that unique fretless thud, gave the early Stones that slinky, soulful R&B groove that other emerging British rock acts, often utilizing standard fretted basses, just couldn't replicate.
That technical insight explains so much. It wasn't a mistake. It was a carefully curated sound profile.
It was. And even as the band's sound matured, he continued experimenting with short scale and unusual instruments.
His arsenal was pretty eclectic, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, he quickly moved beyond the Dallas tuxedo, but he maintained that preference for the short scale. We see him use a famous star bass and other famous models.
And he's famously associated with the distinctive Vox teardrop bass.
A visually iconic instrument that later became a Bill Wyman signature model.
He also played the Fender Mustang bass, which is another short-scale classic, alongside more eccentric choices like the transparent Ampeg Dan Armstrong basses.
A Gibson EB3, and even a Travis Bean bass, which was known for its aluminum neck.
He was always on the hunt for a unique sonic signature.
He was. And this surge continued right into the later years of his Stones tenure. The source notes that since the late 1980s, he largely settled on Steinberger basses.
Headless, minimal design.
Composite materials.
Yeah.
This proves he wasn't stuck in the 60s. He was consistently adopting the most advanced, often non-traditional equipment available to achieve his preferred tone.
And his influence is now permanently woven into the instrument manufacturing world. In 2011, the Bass Center in London honored him by issuing the Wyman bass,
which was a factory-produced, fretted interpretation of that original homemade fretless bass. It's the ultimate acknowledgement of his foundational contribution.
And his physical instruments are now considered invaluable artifacts.
This brings us back to his chronicler role and its financial implications. Consider the astonishing auction result from 2020. His 1969 Fender Mustang bass sold for $380,000.
That is an unbelievable figure for a bass guitar.
It was, at the time of sale, the highest price ever paid for a bass guitar at auction.
Wow.
And that price doesn't reflect the instrument's rarity as much as it reflects the historical weight of the man who wielded it. It's a tangible piece of the stability he provided during the Stones' most productive era.
He didn't just play bass.
He designed the sonic foundation for the early British invasion.
So when Bill Wyman left the Rolling Stones in 1993, he didn't just disappear into obscurity.
Not at all.
He shifted focus to an independent career that was already decades in the making. His main musical vehicle for 2 decades became Bill Wyman's Rhythm Kings.
The Rhythm Kings, formed in 1997 and active until 2018, were the perfect post-Stones project because they explicitly embodied his love for historical music.
Right. They weren't trying to be a contemporary rock band.
No, they focused on covering and celebrating the deep roots of blues, soul, rock and roll, and jazz.
And they were known for their fantastic, regularly rotating, cross-generational lineup of stellar musicians, which created a very different dynamic from the fixed, high-tension structure of the Stones.
It was much more collaborative and celebratory. The lineup often included musicians like Gary Brooker from Procol Harum, Georgie Fame, Albert Lee, Andy Fairweather Lowe.
A real supergroup.
It was less about ego and more about musicianship and respecting the heritage of the music.
Although he was the band leader, he still preferred to stay behind the bass. However, the source notes he typically sang lead vocals on 2 specific covers in the Rhythm Kings setlist.
Chuck Berry's You Never Can Tell
And, predictably, the Stones' classic honky-tonk women.
Hmm.
I imagine performing Honky Tonk Women as the lead singer gave him a chance to reinterpret the song he helped anchor for decades.
That's a lovely thought reclaiming a piece of his own history. Beyond the Rhythm Kings, we have to circle back to his philanthropic efforts.
The Willie and the Poor Boys Project in '83.
A massive undertaking, assembling a legendary rotating cast for the action research into multiple sclerosis benefit.
And the roll call of contributors, it reads like a rock and roll Hall of Fame induction. Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page.
That ability to organize and attract such high-caliber talent speaks to the quiet authority and immense respect Wyman held in the music community, separate from the Jagger-Richards sphere.
He also continued appearing in historical reunion contexts, right? He filled in for Ronnie Lane in the Faces reunion in 2009.
He did, and his participation in the 2011 Ian Stewart tribute album, Boogie for Stew, was particularly meaningful, as Ian Stewart was the Stones' original pianist and road manager.
The Sixth Stone.
The Sixth Stone. Wyman played on 2 tracks, including one recorded with the Stones, reinforcing his status as a historical connector.
Okay, let's turn to the pursuits that truly define him as a Renaissance man and show the depth of his character. We need to talk about his dual life as an amateur archaeologist and a noted photographer.
His passion for archaeology and metal detecting is intense. It's more than a simple hobby, it's an intellectual pursuit. He spent countless hours on treasure detecting adventures across the British Isles, which resulted in his 2005 illustrated book, Treasure Islands, co-written with Richard Havers.
That curiosity about finding, preserving, and documenting the past feels like a direct echo of his need to chronicle the Stones' history. He transitioned from documenting contemporary rock history to documenting ancient human history?
It's the same compulsion, the meticulous search for evidence. And he turned this passion into a successful business.
Selling Bill Wyman's signature metal detectors starting in 2007.
Selling your own line of metal detectors while simultaneously playing blues with superstars is perhaps the ultimate example of the Bill Wyman duality.
It really is. And his photography career is similarly dedicated and detailed. He's taken photographs throughout his entire life, documenting not only the Stones' career from the inside, but also his various artistic acquaintances.
His photography work is of museum quality. In 2010, he launched a major retrospective exhibition in St. Paul de Vence, where he owns a residence in the south of France.
And it featured these candid, intimate images of famous musical figures and artistic acquaintances, including the master painter Marc Chagall.
And then a 2013 London exhibition featured selections of his images that were reworked by contemporary artists, including the famous political cartoonist Gerald Scarfe. This demonstrates that his work is taken seriously in the art world, not just as a rock star's sideline.
It all feeds back into that obsession with documentation. His bibliography is evidence of this.
It spans genres beyond just memoir. We see the historical memoir, Stone Alone, Rolling with the Stones, the musicology, Bill Wyman's Blues Odyssey, the historical hobby, Treasure Islands, and the artistic pursuit, Wyman shoots Chagall.
The uniqueness of Bill Wyman is that he was the quiet one who was also the most prolific. He cultivated this vibrant, intellectually stimulating life outside the main event, ensuring that his identity was never solely tied to his famous band.
And that freedom is what allowed him to leave on his own terms.
When we examine the personal chronicle, we find a character who was outwardly disciplined and stable,
but whose private life was subject to some pretty high-profile drama.
Absolutely. Wyman himself acknowledged this contrast, stating that while he was generally moderate in his use of alcohol and drugs compared to his bandmates,
he admitted to becoming girl mad as a psychological crutch during the chaos of the 60s.
His first marriage was to Diane Corey from 1959 to 1969. They had one son, Stephen, and that marriage overlapped with the very early, intense years of Stones touring.
And his memoir, Stone Alone, includes an anecdote that perfectly captures the transient, almost surreal nature of being a 60s rock star.
It's a story from Adelaide.
Right. He recounted a brief relationship during the 1965 Far East tour in Adelaide, Australia. The following year, he learned the woman had become pregnant.
And what was the outcome of that situation?
The woman chose to move to New Zealand to raise their daughter privately, specifically to spare Wyman the hassle and attention. He respected her wishes, noting in the 1990 edition of Stone Alone that he had not heard from them since.
Which shows a certain distance and detachment that sometimes characterized the personal relationships of that time.
It does.
Then came the controversial chapter that dominated British tabloids, his relationship and subsequent marriage to Mandy Smith.
He married Mandy Smith in 1989. The relationship was highly publicized due to the age gap. He was 52, She was 18.
And they separated only 2 years later and divorced 2 years after that.
And compounding the controversy was the sourced claim that their sexual relationship began when she was 14. This period remains the most scrutinized and difficult part of his personal history.
But following that period, Wyman found the stability he seems to have always craved, marrying his third wife, model Susanna Costa, in April 1993.
And they had already known each other for a long time. They met in 1980 and maintained a friendship until their relationship became romantic. They have 3 daughters together.
This marriage marked the beginning of his independent life and his retirement from the relentless Stones touring schedule.
It did. However, before we move on, we have to talk about the ultimate aha moment buried deep in his personal chronicle.
The astonishing twist.
The astonishing twist involving his son and his ex-wife's mother.
This detail is truly mind-bending. A family structure so complex, it sounds like a sociological thought experiment. Tell us about the marriage that happened in 1993.
Okay. In 1993, the same year, Wyman married Susanna Costa. His son, from his first marriage, Stephen Wyman, who was 30 years old, married Patsy Smith, who was 46 years old.
And
Crucially, Patsy Smith was the mother of Wyman's ex-wife, Mandy Smith.
Wait, so his son married his former mother-in-law?
Precisely.
Okay, my head is spinning.
And if you try to trace the resulting legal and familial lines, the result is astonishing. Bill Wyman, the father, became his own son's ex-son-in-law.
What?
Furthermore, he became the father-in-law of his ex-mother-in-law, Patsy Smith, and by extension the step-grandfather of his ex-wife, Mandy Smith.
That is genuinely absurd. It sounds like something only a meticulous chronicler could keep track of.
It certainly proves that fact is stranger than fiction, especially when dealing with rock stars and their extended families.
Wow. Let's shift to some of his less complicated but equally revealing personal interests and quirks. His sports fandom, for instance, is quite passionate.
He is a lifelong supporter of Crystal Palace FC. The source provides a fantastic anecdote that speaks volumes about his priorities.
Right. During the 1990 European tour with the Rolling Stones, he felt he needed to be in London. Instead of simply asking for time off, he feigned a toothache,
claiming he needed an emergency dental flight back to London.
And what was the real emergency?
He flew back to London specifically to watch Crystal Palace play at Wembley in the 1990 FA Cup final.
That commitment, risking the ire of the Stones' management and bandmates over a football match, shows how intensely he compartmentalized his personal life from his professional obligations.
He's also a keen cricket enthusiast, admiring figures like Dennis Compton. The source even mentions he managed to take a hat-trick, 3 wickets in 3 consecutive deliveries in a celebrity match at the Oval.
This dedication to physical hobbies is paired with a focus on his health later in life. After 55 years of smoking, he finally quit in 2009.
We also know that he was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2016, though thankfully the prognosis was for full recovery.
And finally, a detail that explains his eventual complete departure from touring, the development of a severe phobia.
Around the time of the Steel Wheels tour in the late 80s, he developed a significant fear of flying.
And for a musician in the world's biggest touring band, developing aerophobia is an insurmountable challenge.
This phobia, coupled with his desire to pursue his other intellectual and artistic passions, provided the final logical push toward leaving the band. He simply couldn't sustain that life anymore.
And his residences reflect his success and longevity. He owns Getting Hall, a remarkable country home in Suffolk that dates all the way back to 1458.
Providing that grounded historical connection he craves.
And he also maintains a residence in Saint-Paul-de-Vence in the south of France, where he is embedded in that local artistic community.
It's the life of a Renaissance man. History, art, and stability, all anchored in physical places, far removed from the global rock circus he spent 31 years documenting.
Despite leaving officially in 1993, Wyman's history with the Stones is so deep that total separation seems impossible. His reunion appearances, though rare, are always treated as massive events.
The most high-profile appearances were the Rolling Stones' 50th anniversary shows in London and Newark in 2012. These shows were major historical moments.
And while Daryl Jones played the bulk of the set, Wyman was expected to join the core members on stage.
He did. He played 2 back-to-back songs at the London shows, It's Only Rock and Roll, But I Like It, and Honky Tonk Women. It was a powerful, symbolic moment for the fans.
But importantly, those cameos weren't a signal of a full-time return.
No. Wyman later stated quite clearly that he was simply not interested in joining the band for further tour dates in 2013. He had moved past the rigorous touring schedule and was content prioritizing his Rhythm Kings and other pursuits.
That independence is consistent, But it makes his return to the studio in 2023 for the Hackney Diamonds album all the more significant.
It's a huge moment. Wyman briefly returned to recording with his former bandmates, playing bass on one specific track, Live by the Sword.
This wasn't just a nostalgic gesture, was it?
Not at all. It was the band deliberately utilizing the talents and historical connection of their original anchor.
And this marks his first appearance on a Rolling Stones studio recording since 1991.
32 years. The decision by Jagger and Richards to call him back, 32 years after he left, confirms that he isn't just an ex-member. He is an honored veteran whose sound and presence can still be utilized for historical milestones.
It cements his unique status. He can dip in and out on his own terms.
He retains the historical connection without the professional obligation. And the fact that he continues to create new music independently reinforces that preference for autonomy.
Indeed. We should note his latest solo album, Drive My Car, which was released in August 2024. This means that, at an advanced age, he is still actively creating, writing, and releasing music under his own name.
Parallel to making these selective guest appearances with the Stones.
So the synthesis here is clear. Bill Wyman managed to negotiate the impossible.
He spent over 30 years anchoring one of the most demanding jobs in music history, yet never lost his core identity. He maintains an enduring connection to the Stones for historical moments, as evidenced by Hackney Diamonds.
But by prioritizing the Rhythm Kings, his photography, his writing, and his new solo work, he ensured that he left on his own terms and set a high standard for a musically and intellectually vibrant post-Stones life.
Yeah.
This deep dive into Bill Wyman reveals a fascinating paradox. He was the steadfast, innovative bass player, the one who modified his fretless instrument to define the early Stones' deep R&B groove.
And provided the crucial anchor against the chaos.
And he was simultaneously the hyper-aware, meticulous chronicler, a respected photographer, a published author, and an amateur archaeologist who literally sought out and documented history, ensuring that his life and the history of the world's biggest band was archived with painstaking detail in his journals.
He defined stability in the eye of the storm.
We've explored the man who, despite being the oldest and the quietest member, held one of the most unique and valuable perspectives on the biggest rock band in the world. He was the anchor, the witness, and the quiet revolutionary who ensured the most important song of their career ever saw the light of day.
So we want to leave you with this final, provocative thought drawn directly from our source material. Given that Bill Wyman possessed the most comprehensive personal records of the Rolling Stones' history, and was instrumental in pushing for the release of I Can't Get No Satisfaction against the wishes of the core songwriters. What other crucial band-defining moments throughout rock history might have been decided not by the spotlight-hogging frontmen, but by the thoughtful, disciplined historian keeping score and providing stability in the background?
The ultimate value of the perpetual witness.
The man with the diary and the homemade bass. It's a history lesson we are perhaps still learning.